Hello, welcome to the Fancy Think. I'm Jared, and I'm going to do something on this channel that I haven't done in quite a while, and that's put out an essay type thing. And I've been thinking about this for a while. I've been thinking about critical analysis and reviewing and how I approach that stuff. But most of the time, I'm not really going that deep into critical analysis or anything like that. Because that takes some work and I'm just having fun here on this channel. But every once in a while, these things stay in my head. These are the things I've learned over the years, and every once in a while, I like to put out one of these type of essays. So what also got me thinking about this and thinking about it for a while was a little less than a year ago, I think. Philip Chase and AP Canavan put out a series about how to analyze stories, and it was very good, very informative, and they are professors, so it was top notch stuff, right? But um, so this isn't like refuting anything they did or anything like that. This is just adding on to it, just more ways to think about analysis of stories and more ways of doing it because everybody has their own means of disseminating information and putting it out there and understanding things and stuff like that. And so I figured I'd try to do this in maybe originally I wrote this essay in like 5 parts, and maybe I'll do that here and just blend my transition my videos together and see how it goes. So first things first, this I'm just a guy passing on a little knowledge I have to those who might like it, and that's pretty much all it is. This critical analysis stuff doesn't mean you suddenly won't like your favorite movie or book, and it doesn't mean you should sell off your comic book collection. It's just another way to expand your mind, just like reading does, and just like the visual arts do, and music, and all the other artistic endeavors. Critical analysis, in a way, is just another art form, and analysis can be equally criticized on its own merits. Are there critics for the critics? Most likely there are. These ideas also don't mean that I sit there and go into, like deep into the weeds on every form of entertainment I consume. That would be impossible for me. For most people, it could probably drive you insane. Probably be not too healthy for any of your relationships either. But if you do find analysis entertaining, then picking and choosing what to look like, that's the best way to go about it. And just like any other art form, you probably have to be in the right frame of mind and to indulge in your critical nature. Um, so where to start? Mostly, I'll be talking about storytelling in the written form. That's what I know best because I don't know anything about or very little about painting or architecture or sculpting or many other things. But these concepts should be applicable to all art forms in one way or another. um, so when considering hmm, a work of art, um, there are certain questions we can ask to help us evaluate it. One, what is its purpose? Is it something that the creator made to reflect certain facets of society? Something to entertain, something to educate or raise awareness, and so on. It can be simple or very complex in its construction, depending upon what its purpose is. And two, does it do it? Does the work of art accomplish the goal it set out to do? Did it entertain, etc.? um, and three, specifically, how does it win or lose? And this is where we get into the details. Here is where we discover the how, the when, the where, and the why. This is where your inner critic can shine in. it is the meat and potatoes of what we'll be discussing here. Most of the specificity I'll be looking at will be storytelling. So we're going to start with the concept of operationalization. Um, and it sounds like kind of a made up word, but it has a definition. Operationalization is the concept whereby a definition contains within itself enough objective critical criteria for an uninformed observer to determine if a thing is the thing defined. So basically, is what you are looking at the thing that was defined? Like for an object, like this pen here, a definition of this pen with all its functioning parts um, serves by itself to operationalize it. But for a concept, well, that's where we have to delve much deeper than a simple definition. This is what this series is going to explore a little bit here, and I'll try to explain how knowledge of this concept can be helpful to someone who wishes to evaluate a work of art as opposed to just opining it. Um, so once you've operationalized your definition of a good or bad work of art, you have by definition objectively stated your critical standards for either contrast or comparison. So, just to be clear, this also can open your definitions up to criticism for good or ill. So be aware of that. All right. So, what are we looking for in a story? What makes a story good or bad for us? For some of us, we want to feel that a story moves us, that it brings out some kind of emotion, whether that's sadness, joy, contentment, wonder, or even anger. The kind of emotion and the definition of what the emotion is matters less than the fact that the emotion is there. A story that works for us brings those emotions to the fore so that they can be purged. This purging of emotion in the reader is called catharsis. Achieving catharsis is also means that we have achieved, for good or ill, a sense of empathy, either with the characters or circumstances. This is usually in conjunction with the characters also having an epiphany of their own, referred to as a anagnorisis, if I could say that right. Uh, this is when a character comes to understand the true nature of their own circumstances or has access to knowledge of the self and their relationship to the cosmos or universe or world or what have you. Um, when both catharsis and of the viewer and anagnorisis of the character is in sync, we usually get an aesthetic reaction. Empathy is the key here. This is the state of being that has evolved in higher mammalian life forms as a function of survival in tribal units. This empathy is what the storyteller is trying to elicit through their creation. They want you to feel what their character feels, to feel as sorry as the character, not sorry for the character, which is sympathy, although that can happen too. The storyteller does this through subtlety or indirection and aesthetics of or pertaining to beauty. Thus, it behooves us to define what it is we are looking for when we read a story. So, this is aesthetic reaction, that emotional experience a perceiver undergoes when they intellectually recognize the degree of subtlety with which the elements of form interrelate in creating a theme in a work of art. There's some corollaries to this. One, the greater a perceiver's capacity to intellectually recognize this degree of subtlety, the greater the potential for an aesthetic reaction. And two, the greater the degree of subtlety with which the elements of form interrelate in creating a theme in a work of art, the more beautiful the work, the more aesthetically valuable the work. That's a lot to unpack there. Um, There are also terms in that definition that we haven't gone over yet, so uh, we'll get there. Don't fret. Let's break down theme and form into its most basic definitions. Theme is what to say. Form is how to say it. So let's explore theme a bit. In the interest of brevity, something I'm a big fan of, this is by no means a complete definition. This is not a scholarly treatment, it's just some basic tenets. There are three basic questions to ask when trying to determine a theme in a story. These are not the only questions one can ask, but these will generally get you there. One, what is it about? Your answer should never mention plot or plot points, which are events. If your answer is it's about a man who goes to the store and buys a dragon, then you're telling us the events in the story, which is not what the story is about. More than likely, the story is about the search for the fantastic in everyday mundane activities, or the consequences of wishing the fantastic existed in our reality, or something along those lines. So, two, what is the major conflict? What happens in the story that makes it a story? What When a guy buys a dragon, does the dragon then burn down his apartment by accident? Is the conflict between man and nature or man and society? More importantly, as it relates to theme, how is the conflict resolved? Or is it? This is not to be confused with conflict as an element of form. We'll see that later on, but it's only to help us determine the theme or themes in the story. And three, what character or characters change the most or refuse to? This is kind of related to the idea of anagnorisis. Still don't know if I'm getting that right, but does the character come to a realization about their relationship to the universe, or do they refuse to? What do they learn or refuse to learn? If you can answer why our guy felt motivated to buy a dragon and what he learned as a result of the consequences of buying a dragon, then you may be able closer to discovering the theme of the story. Okay, so on to form, or more specifically, elements of form. The elements of form, you have plot, which is the logical arrangement of sequence of events. You have character, the doers of the action. You got setting, the where and the when. You got tone, the author's attitude towards the subject matter as it can be inferred. You got conflict, the struggle between opposing forces. And you got point of view, the vantage point from which the tale is being told. Those are very, very, very brief definitions. And what's important to note is that each of these are a vital part of storytelling that contributes to the whole. Except in very rare experimental cases, a story, should have all six of these. Sometimes one or more of these elements may be hidden and give the impression that it's missing, but it's probably in there. Also, one of these elements can be dominant, overshadowing the rest, and to become like the focus of the story. And there can be arguments made to place any one of these above the others in importance, but they're all needed in one way or another. The elements of form are what authors use to tell a story. They're the building blocks, the nuts and bolts, so to speak. So let's just take a look at this little chart I put up here. Those crappy little symbols there that I put up there in there, turn sideways friends. That stands for the word interrelates. Okay, so as human beings, our emotions are always interrelating with our intellect, right? Sometimes in concert and other times in conflict with ourselves. Um, when seeking out or determining what we like, we feed on or crave the emotional as well as the intellectual stimulation something can give us. In this same manner, in a work of art, in a story, theme interrelates with form. This happens in many diverse and subtle ways. Often it is the interplay of various elements of form that help to create that theme, but the theme can also inform the story as to how the elements interact. 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 Yeah. Uh, going down the chart, as you emotionally interact with the theme, you can then intellectually be stimulated by recognizing that theme. And as you intellectually interact with the elements of form, you can be emotionally stimulated by their degree of subtlety. It is at that point that we can achieve the aesthetic reaction of catharsis, right? If you see how the definitions we had previously come come around to this point here, and so with all that information in mind, we go back to our original questions and take into consideration these concepts as we evaluate a work of art. We'll be able to look at the indirection of subtlety and whether the elements of form are used effectively or not. Um, we'll be able to tell if a theme resonates with the subject matter to move us with its aesthetics. With your own personal complex combination of emotion and intellect, you now have the tools to decipher the relationship between theme and the elements of form in any story. Just like anything else in life, the more you partake in this type of critical analysis, the better you'll get at it until it becomes somewhat second nature. Um, this doesn't mean you're going to pick up everything all the time. You won't. Nobody does. Um, you'll, I constantly look to others to talk about and disseminate stories with because there's no way I can pick up everything. There's no way anybody can. Um, but like me, you actually may seek out more. And so that's kind of how these tools work for me. They stimulate me and they inform me to seek out more reaction and interaction with with works of art, literature, and specifically. And I think it helps a lot. All right, so now that we have all that information, what do we do with it? Easy answer: whatever you want. Right? They're just tools. How you apply them is up to you. But there's some other information related to this that could inform you on how you'd like to approach analysis if that's what you would like to do. There are different methods of inquiry when it comes to critical analysis. I am mostly familiar with the first method, but the others can be just as valid. The first method being analytical. And what I've explained in previous sections of this video is the analytical method of inquiry. This is interpretive. Um, you examine elements of form and you see how they come together to justify your interpretation. Then you can move on to evaluative, where the quality of the work is determined by the degree of subtlety with which the elements of form interrelate to create a theme, and where your learning and experience with the work can enhance or detract from your aesthetic reaction. So that's the important nuts and bolts of analytical method. Another method is psychological, and this is where the work's analyzed based upon their psychological impact, either on the individual or society. There's like Freudian and Jung comparisons to be made here, and probably many others as well. I wasn't going to use examples in this essay, but in this case, I will. This would be an example of a psychological evaluation. It's Individuation in the Malazan Book of the Fallen by Michael Woods, called Fall in Ascent, and it's a Jungian analysis. Jungian, however you say that. And so it's a psychological analysis of the of that work. So, three is sociological. This is where a work is judged solely on the time it is written in and its impact on society in the moment. An understanding of the time period in which the work was produced is kind of a must for this kind of analysis. A work analyzed in this way would have its political, theological, or ideological posturing as part of its breakdown. Four is biographical, and this is a comparative analysis of a work and others to determine veracity of its interpretation of someone's life, whether it's their outward details or even their inner thoughts. And five is deconstructionist. This type of analysis tends to tear things down and break them apart until it comes to the conclusion that it isn't what it set out to be. I'm not really a big fan of that style, but anyways, we don't have to get into that. Like I stated above, I am mostly just concerned with analytical analysis. I find it is the most fun for me to think about. There's a few other terms and ideas that may pop up during analysis or discussions. These may or may not impact your interpretation, depending on whether they are relevant. There's things like figures of speech, which is usually just a fancy way of saying something. It can enhance your enjoyment of a story depending on context. There's irony, and this is the attention established between opposites. There's actually several forms of irony. There's verbal irony, which is the discrepancy between what a character says and what the character means, which can also include sarcasm, you think. Two, there's situational irony, which is the discrepancy between what would normally be anticipated and what actually occurs. And this type of irony is kind of a mainstay in literature and film. It's kind of everywhere. Um, and then there's dramatic irony, which is the discrepancy between what the character says, which could be a narrator, and what the author intends. And audience awareness of this irony is optional. This is usually the most difficult type of irony to detect, especially if it's done very subtly. Um, all right, so then we move on to surrealism. And this is kind of like a super reality. The author exaggerates reality to the point of total distortion. And then there's metaphor, the comparison of unlike objects or even ideas. Metaphors can be connotative, that is, subjective, figurative with emotional meaning, or denotative, which is objective, literary, and unemotional. Then you have symbolism. That's a kind of a metaphor with the tenor removed, the object you're describing. So you have all these things there you can throw in there. All these terms and definitions. They're just options and things to think about as you go through and try to analyze a story. All right. So I'm hoping that this series has given you just some information that will open up ideas and enhance enjoyment of everything you read. This theory of operationalization isn't just for art or story. It can probably be applied to other things in life in a more simple, straightforward manner. But I think it's a fun tool that we can use to enhance our enjoyment, learning, and progression towards becoming the type of reader we want to be. It's by no means the be all and end all. It is a figure of speech thing of criticism. It's just a theory. It's just a tool for us to use or discard as our own personal situations demand. So, and I think that's anything when it comes to any kind of story analysis. That's that's pretty solid way to look at it. In any case, these are tools. Like if you've watched um, the Critical Dragons and Philip Chase's means of analysis, story analysis, then those are tools as well, very good tools. And so, you know, use what you think is best for you. That's all I'm saying. All right. If you stuck with me this far, thanks so much for watching. And I have this in a document. If anybody's interested in getting a copy of it, let me know. I'll send it on to you. I have no problem with that. And I just would like to say that I learned this stuff from one Professor Coughlin. a long time ago. I don't think he's around anymore, but, he taught it to me at the University of Massachusetts, and I, never forgot it. I've kind of retweaked it and rewrote it many times to suit my own idiom. And, but if, but that's who I learned it from, and he in turn learned it from somebody else, many, many moons ago. But this is, this is what it is, and, like I said, if you, uh, if you enjoyed this, please let me know. And, with that said, be good to each other, and as always, like and subscribe if you like this, and thank you.